Mayor, we are now live. You may begin the meeting.
Great, thank you, Mr. Milan. So welcome everyone to our April 13th City Council meeting. Apologies for a change in venue. I was looking forward to being at the bandshell again today. But despite my giving a hard time to Councilmember Garcia about melting in the rain, I learned that it was more of an issue of electronics and being in the wet weather. So thank you. Hopefully everyone was able to join us who wanted to join us. And please share with your friends and family if they're willing to join. Information's both on the website and on our social media posts. So with that, I'll ask City Clerk, Madam City Clerk Aguilar, if she can please take the roll call.
Yes, ma'am. Mayor Rachel Arizmendi.
Present.
Mayor Pro Tem Jean Goss.
Here.
Councilmember Edward Garcia.
Present.
Councilmember Kelly Krebs.
Here.
And Councilmember Robert Parkhurst.
Here.
Madam Mayor, you have a quorum. You can conduct city business.
Great, thank you. And today we'll ask Mayor Pro Tem Goss if he can please lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance and inspiration.
Okay, everyone, please rise. Ready, begin. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. You can be seated. Well, I was all fired up this weekend to share some famous quotes about spring, because we've had such incredible spring weather early in the spring. Then I was watching the forecast, and today came around and we got rained out of our meeting. I thought, do I go through with this or not? But I'm going to do it anyway because we've had such a wonderful spring so far. My hay fever notwithstanding, I might have to clear my throat a couple of times. But I put together a few famous quotes about spring in the spirit of something inspirational. I'll start with Charlotte Bronte. I believe that's how you pronounce her name, from Jane Eyre. Spring, I better get my reading glasses on here. Spring drew on, and a greenness grew over those brown beds, which, freshening daily, suggested the thought that hope traversed them at night and left each morning brighter traces of her steps. Shakespeare, one of his famous sonnets, April hath put a spirit of youth in everything. And John Steinbeck from The Wayward Bus. He's speaking of California, by the way. In the deep spring, when the grass was green on fields and foothills, when the lupines and the poppies made a splendid blue and gold earth, when the great trees awakened in yellow-green young leaves, then there was no more lovely place in the world. It was no beauty you could ignore by being used to it. It caught you in the throat in the morning and made a pain of pleasure in the pit of your stomach when the sun went down over it. Ernest Hemingway, speaking of Paris in spring. With so many trees in the city, you could see the spring coming each day until a night of warm wind would bring it suddenly in the morning. Part of you died each year when leaves fell from the trees and their branches were bare against the wind and the cold and the wintry light. But you knew there would always be spring, as you knew the river would flow after it was frozen. I love this one from Charles Dickens. Came from Great Expectations, by the way. Spring is the time of year when it is summer in the sun and winter in the shade. From Tony Sorensen. Spring is childhood, summer is youth, autumn is maturity, and winter is weariness and waiting. But with spring, youth returns, no matter how old we are. And I had to get a baseball guy in here. So from Roger Hornsby. People ask me what I do in the winter when there's no baseball. I'll tell you what I do. I stare out the window and wait for spring. And finally, from Margaret Atwood. In the spring, at the end of the day, you should smell like dirt. Madam Mayor, the floor is yours.
That's a great last quote. Not that all of them weren't, but I really appreciate that last one. Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. Next item on the agenda is the approval of the meeting agenda. Motion to approve the agenda as is, or do we have any changes? We have a
Move
motion.
to approve.
Thank you, Councilmember Parkhurst.
Second.
Thank you, Councilmember Krebs. Oh, now we have to do individual roll call, I assume, Madam City Clerk.
Yes,
If we can please take roll on that item.
yes.
Vote. So, all in favor.
Motion to approve the agenda as presented. Mayor Rachel Arizmendi.
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Jean Goss.
Aye.
Councilmember Edward Garcia.
Aye.
Councilmember Kelly Krebs.
Aye.
And Councilmember Robert Parkhurst.
Aye.
Madam Mayor, the motion to approve has been passed unanimously.
Thank you. Next item on the agenda is approval of reading resolutions and ordinances. Do you have a motion for a first? I'll make the first motion to approve. Do you have a second?
Second.
Councilmember Garcia. And Madam City Clerk, if you could take a roll call vote, please.
Yes, I don't miss this, do you?
No.
Mayor Rachel Arizmendi.
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Jean Goss.
Aye.
Councilmember Edward Garcia.
Aye.
Councilmember Kelly Krebs.
Aye.
And Councilmember Robert Parkhurst.
Aye.
The motion to approve the reading of resolutions and ordinance has been approved unanimously.
Thank you. Next item on the agenda is approval of the meeting minutes. Do we have any changes, edits, revisions, corrections?
Madam Mayor,
Yes, Councilmember Parkhurst.
I have an amendment on page 6 under discussion related to Senate Bill 612. The fourth paragraph, it's the first sentence. It says the City Council discussed the proposed Senate bill, considering the impact on Sierra Madre residents and the reasons for the delay in approval in the Senate. I don't remember discussing a delay in the approval in the Senate, and I'm not certain that there was one. It's just part of the standard gear up of bill introduction. So I would propose that we just strike that. So this sentence would read, the City Council discussed the proposed Senate bill and considered the impact on Sierra Madre residents.
Okay, thank you, Councilmember Parkhurst. Do you have any other edits or corrections?
No, Madam Mayor.
Okay, does anyone else have any corrections or edits? Seeing none, do I have a motion to approve with the amendment as Councilmember Parkhurst proposed?
I move to approve as amended.
Thank you, Councilmember Cruz. Second?
Second.
Second, thank you, Councilmember Garcia. And Madam City Clerk, if we can take a roll call vote, please.
Yes, and Mayor Rachel Arizmendi.
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Jean Goss.
Aye.
Councilmember Edward Garcia.
Aye.
Councilmember Kelly Krebs.
Aye.
And Councilmember Robert Parkhurst.
Aye.
The motion to approve as amended has passed.
Thank you. And hopefully we'll no longer be doing virtual meetings when any of you are representatives on the city selection. That one we have to do individual roll call votes for more than 60 individuals. So that's very fun. The next item on the agenda is the mayor and city council reports. Who would like to start with report out?
I'll go ahead,
Thank
Madam
you.
Mayor.
Mayor Pro Tem.
The only thing I wanted to report is I went to the last Library Board of Trustees meeting where they are still revving up their plan to renovate the library. As part of our consent agenda tonight, there is one item that's related to that. I'll let it speak for itself. Other than that, I'm waiting for the other committee to kind of put together a more formal set of ideas about how they want to use the rest of the lot and the property, and I'll bring it back to council when I know what it's going to be.
Thank you,
That's
Mayor
it.
Boss. Thank you. Any other reports?
Madam Mayor,
Councilmember?
I had a brief meeting with Chief Bartlett and the CERT team. And the CERT team is going to be coming before us with a resolution to formalize their role with the city. So we'll be seeing that in the May timeframe. And I think that they have a lot to offer us. It's a number of individuals with lots of training that can help us in the event of an emergency. So more to come on that in probably at one of our May or June meetings.
Thank you. Anyone else want to report out?
Madam Mayor,
Councilmember Garcia.
not really official city business, but kind of in the spirit of Mayor Pro Tem's quotes, new life and new beginnings and in spring. I just wanted to report that I think all the schools in town are now open, at least at some capacity for the students attending. Sierra Madre Elementary just opened to kindergarten through second today, with next week the middle school and the remainder of the elementary school repopulating to some capacity, with still an option for those that prefer to stay home and do distance learning. That's still an option for them. So it's good things are happening. We're moving forward, and it really is a springtime celebration. It's almost like new life here in town. So I think it's a good thing.
Great. Thank you, Councilmember Garcia. Councilmember Krebs, do you have anything to report out?
No, not today.
Okay, thank you. So I'll just do a quick report. Just wanted to welcome City Treasurer Micah Mario to the meeting. Yay. Hopefully he'll share a little bit during the treasurer report, so we can put him on the spot since we haven't been able to during our virtual meetings. Also wanted to report out, I had the opportunity to visit our water main project on Grandview with Director Miles Prince, and a big thank you to Director Reynoso and Director Semino for taking us around and really getting a close-up look, I should say, to the project and seeing what's going on there. You know, despite the fact that it seems like it would be such a difficult thoroughfare to get through, traffic was able to get through just fine. But I also was really surprised at all of the pipes that are going through and the connections that are going through on Grandview. It's a really important street. I think we have up to 5 different lines that are going through there. And to see how much work goes into just 1 mile of replacement. So thank you to the team there. And it really was a good experience to witness that up close. A couple other things. National Library Week was this past week, and Chief Armelin, I had no idea what a great reader you are. I think you did 15 minutes worth, and you're so animated. So if anyone has the opportunity to watch that, that's there. But there were so many different activities that I know that the library celebrated with this week. California Conservation Corps, all the work that they're doing on their hazard reduction. I've seen the vans going through, I've seen them marching around. We're really thankful that that grant came into place when it did and the timeliness of it. And it's been great to have that partnership with the Conservation Corps. And I'm trying to see what else I had in my notes. It's been so long since we've met, but and since then we've even had our vaccine clinic. I was so happy to hear that all the spots filled up so fast. We were even doing home visits. So I know we were able to get those inoculated that wanted to. The last I saw, City of Sierra Madre still had the highest rate of vaccines in the population, and I get very competitive and I like to see how we compare to all of the other cities. So I don't know where we are today or this week, but I know a couple weeks ago we were still #1. So a lot going on in the city. I may have missed some. I think police department also had public safety communications week, and we were able to recognize some of our team there. So that's really been great to see too. So with that, we can move on to the next item, which is public comment. I know we didn't get any public comments via email, but I wanted to make sure we have the opportunity to offer public comment to any items that are not on the agenda. And I'll just ask if Mr. Delgado or Mr. Milan, if we have anyone online that is raising their hands to speak, and or if we have any call-ins, please.
Madam Mayor, we do have someone wishing to speak.
Great, if we can go ahead and patch them through, please.
Caller, you are live in the comment. Please proceed with your comment. Hugo, are you there?
Yes, I'm here.
Go ahead, sir. You are live for public comment.
Yes, I just want to ask you because I joined the meeting late because I went to physically to the across the street. My question is about the permit for uh, for the construction of the tower. I don't know, is that one meeting and this meeting, or is another meeting?
No, it's actually this meeting, sir. And if you want to stay on the meeting, that will be item number 1 on our public hearing after our consent calendar. So if you'd like to stay, I believe that's the item you want to speak on. So if
Yes.
you can raise your hand at the time that the item comes up for public comment, we'd like to hear from you then.
Okay.
Thank you. Mr. Delgado, do we have anyone else waiting for public comment?
It does not appear anyone else has raised their hand or called in.
Okay, great, thank you. The next item on the agenda is the presentations, and actually right before that presentation, as part of my report, I wanted to do a quick thank you of appreciation for the Solt family. As many of you know, our wisteria house, one of them will be sold. And this is our second year not being able to have our wisteria festival so that we can visit the vine. And for those of you that don't know about the vine, I'd be really surprised, but I'm sure that you all do. I think we're at 127 years now of our celebration. Guinness Book of World Records, largest wisteria vine. We wanted to say thank you to Robert and Nell Solt. We have a certificate of appreciation because we were not able to open up the vine this year because of the pandemic. They allowed people to come in to have to take pictures of it and to view it. So I invite you to social media, and maybe the chamber and wisteria groups may be posting also. But ironically, the vine is beautiful this year. So many blossoms in bloom. And I know it's a matter of luck sometimes as to whether the bloom will be a nice one for when visitors come to check it out. But in the meantime, we just want to thank them for, again, opening their home up for all of these years, and especially this year, so we can take a peek at it before it's sold. So thank you to Robert and Nell Soltz in appreciation of your hospitality and opening the Wisteria House to the community. Thank you, and we look forward to getting this to you, I hope, before you leave. So with that, I would like to ask Management Analyst Carlson, if you'd like to present on the stormwater MS4 permit regulations and compliance efforts.
Sure, great. Good evening, Madam Mayor and members of council. This is a quick presentation for you today. It's just some information only. There's no action required. It's common for elected officials to run into stormwater topics when they're at forums at the League of Cities or Council of Governments, and also you're going to be watching some state legislation go on. So I wanted to give a little background, let you know what Sierra Madre is doing, and then I'll also be able to hand off to our City Attorney Garagosian to talk about litigation that you may be needing to find out about. Okay, first of all, what I like to do is clarify acronyms. That's the first thing I do when I talk about stormwater. MS4, where does that come from? It stands for Municipal Separate Storm Sewer System. This is unique on the western half of the United States because we have a separate system for traditional sewage and stormwater sewage. On the East Coast, they combine them. They are combined in little places in California, like California, and a little bit in Sacramento, but in LA County, they are separate systems. And it is a city-specific type of NPDES stormwater permit that comes from both the Porter Cologne Act, which is a state regulation, and the Clean Water Act, which is the federal regulation. In 1990, there was the first local MS4 permit, and it was the county took it. And so the cities in Los Angeles County worked through the county to comply with the requirements at that point. Moving forward in 1998, there was a consent decree that established 33 regional TMDLs. TMDLs, you'll see on the bottom there, equals total maximum daily load, simply the maximum amount of pollutant that a water body can receive and still meet water quality standards. In 2012, our current MS4 permit was adopted, and it formally incorporated these 33 regional TMDLs into Los Angeles County. What does it require of us? It requires that non-stormwater discharges into the MS4 are prohibited, and we have to have a mechanism to prohibit them. When I say non-stormwater, we're talking about nuisance water. A lot of times it's over irrigation, but it could be somebody dumping something that they really shouldn't be. There are a couple of exceptions, such as firefighting activities, and you are allowed to drain your pool into the gutter in the street, but there can't be any sanitation in it. Stormwater pollution must be eliminated to the maximum extent practicable, and that's a carryover from the previous permit. We are required to do minimum control measures such as street sweeping, and you might notice at construction zones there are sandbags or other things to keep the runoff from going into the street and into the storm drain. Monitoring, you were presented with the MOU for monitoring. We do that with the City of Arcadia and the other members of our group. We're spending about $57,000 a year to participate in that. And the real key about the 2012 permit is TMDL compliance now becomes numeric. It's black and white. You make the number or you do not make the number. In order to help the cities become into compliance, in 2012, they established watershed management plans. Without participating in watershed management plans, a city has to immediately demonstrate compliance with all of the TMDL numeric limits. So back in 2016, the group that you see above, Sierra Madre, Arcadia, Monrovia, Bradbury, DeWarty, LA County Unincorporated, and at that time, Azusa, we got together and created a watershed management plan. It doesn't look exactly like the one you're looking at now because the one we had before had an estimated cost of $1.4 billion that the group would have to find funding for till approximately 2028. The group got together and thought that there was a better way to do it. We found a different consultant, Tetra Tech here in Pasadena. They went and revised our watershed management plan. At that time, Azusa decided to leave. And what we did is we determined that we'd be better off with larger regional projects instead of a whole bunch of Green Street type projects that significantly brought the cost down. In fact, it was pointed out that if you put all of our Green Street projects from the original watershed management plan together, they would go from Los Angeles to Tucson, Arizona. We also like to do things in Sierra Madre, and we call these local distributed capture projects. It can be evidenced by a picture of the City Hall landscaping project before. It was all overgrown, but that is designed to take water from off the rooftop of City Hall and of the public safety building and capture it, clean it, infiltrate it into the ground below us. To the right, you could see what we call a drain that we would put on, there's two streets, Fain Street and Ramona, and that's just to get some of the water off and to infiltrate it straight into the ground. You'd be happy to know that our current Kirsten Court project also has a stormwater capture feature on it as well. In November of 2018, a magical thing happened when we're looking at funding of these projects, and that was the passage of Measure W. And it passed with a 2/3 countywide vote. It has subsequently become the Safe Clean Water Program. With this program, the city of Sierra Madre gets an estimated $150,000 per year for our own use. And regionally, there is $140 million for larger projects. If you take a look in the middle, this is the Rio Hondo section that we belong to with most of our partners. And so there are awards up to $11 million every year based on applications. Fortunately, some of the projects that you can see here, a small portion of the Arcadia Wash or Arboretum project was funded. A technical funding was done for our diversion project here. We are working towards the larger ecosystem restoration project for Rio Hondo. Basin 3 is slow because we're working with the Army Corps of Engineer, and Encanto Park was actually fully funded with this regional money. And I'll go ahead and pass it off to City Attorney Garagosian to give you some information on litigation, and I'll forward the slides for you, Alex.
All right, thank you, Analyst Carlson. So you had mentioned that there were permits issued. Those permits are issued by the regional boards. There are 9 regional boards in the state of California. We're in the jurisdiction of the LA Regional Water Quality Control Board. And so in December 2012, the regional board finalized the 2012 permits. In June 2015, the state board approved those 2012 permits. And then in July 2015, the cities of Duarte, Huntington Park, and Gardena filed lawsuits. And so this initiated a huge region-wide lawsuit because 82 other cities, including Sierra Madre, joined as real parties in interest to this suit. So our city, we haven't taken a very active role in the litigation, but we have filed a declaration in support of the plaintiff's opening brief, noting that the entire city's annual budget is 10.8 million at the time, and the watershed management plans that Analyst Carlson was talking about, those were expected to cost the city $23 million over 11 years. So it's a huge expense individually for the city. The trial was held from November 2017 through August 2018. And in December 2018, the court issued its tentative decision in favor of the permittees. Meanwhile, the regional board issued notices of violation to the city because they claimed we weren't meeting the progress and the goals under the watershed management plan. And in September 2019, the trial court issued a final judgment in writ, finding that the State Water Control Board failed to adequately consider economic considerations, and it eventually struck down the permit. Next slide. So predictably, the water boards appealed, and they were actually successful in their appeal because in January 2021, the appellate court issued its decision reversing the trial court, claiming that the State Water Control Board did properly consider economic considerations. And so then the cities sought a rehearing at the Court of Appeal. Rehearing was denied. So now they're seeking a writ at the California Supreme Court. It's not likely that the court will take this case. Generally speaking, the court takes about, the California Supreme Court takes about 5% of the cases that are petitioned. But this would be a good candidate because it has such broad implications for the state of California. The cities have also sought depublication of the Court of Appeal case because they don't want it to be used as precedent in the future. Next slide. So while this litigation is happening, there's also concurrent litigation, and this has to do with state mandates. And if you're not familiar with the state mandate process, I thought I'd give some history because the state mandate process is actually, I think, more complex than the litigation I just went through. So what is a state mandate? It's basically anytime the state tells a local government or an individual they have to do something, right? That's in short, a state mandate. And in 1979, the California electorate voted in favor of Prop 4. That's the GAN limit, for those who aren't familiar with it, which added Article 13B to our state constitution. So in that picture there, you have Paul Gann on the left, So that the GAN limit's named after him. And on the right, you have Howard Jarvis. That's the author of Prop 13. So this article generally restricts the amounts state and local governments may appropriate and spend each year from the proceeds of taxes. So it limited how much the state can spend. The authors of this amendment feared that if they limited how much the state could spend, then the state was just going to force cities to spend that money. And as a result, they created this thing called the Commission on State Mandates. They created this process where anytime the state requires a new government program or a higher level of service for an existing program that they impose on local governments, the state has to reimburse the city for that. So they created this thing called the Commission on State Mandates. It's a state agency tasked with determining whether the state must reimburse local public agencies for the cost of implementing a program or permit. Next slide. And so in 2001, so the permit we talked about in the litigation, that was a 2012 permit. This permit's even older. This is the 2001 permit that we're fighting over, and we're still fighting over it. The 2001 permit was issued by the board, and then the cities filed a test claim with the Commission on State Mandates. The Commission on State Mandates found, in fact, it was an unfunded mandate, meaning the state has to reimburse the cities. The state water board predictably appealed. It went to the California Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court also said, yes, it's an unfunded mandate. But now, so that then the Supreme Court sent it back to the lower court to figure out, okay, it's an unfunded mandate, who has to pay for what now? The US EPA got involved. I won't get into the details of that. And then the trial court said, after it found out that it's an unfunded mandate, the trial court determined, well, no, actually, the cities have a means to pay for it, so the city should bear the cost. And what happened most recently in January 2021, the Court of Appeal reversed in part, stating that the local governments are responsible for paying the costs of conducting inspections of certain facilities and construction sites, but that the state is responsible for the cost of installing and maintaining trash receptacles at transit stops. And so that's all that's about. The reason we don't have a state mandates claim on the 2012 permit is because we're still fighting over the 2001 permit, and whatever's decided in the 2001 permit will affect the 2012 permit. So I don't believe the state has sought Supreme Court review yet of the Court of Appeals decision, but they're likely to. So this is likely not over. And that concludes my section.
Great, and I'll just go ahead and conclude with where Sierra Madre, as a member of the group, is at. Each of these lines, horizontal lines, are one of the regional projects that we're looking at. Plus, there's also some distributed projects for places that aren't going to be covered. The Arcadia Wash Ecosystem Restoration and Groundwater Recharge Project was located at the Arboretum. A small component of that was awarded and will be completed. However, we have very recently thought through our planning stage here, or found out that the project will not be feasible. So this is one of the concerns confronting the group right now. We are looking for another project along the Arcadia Wash because we are really concerned that we want Sierra Madre's runoff to be captured and cleaned up along with the other cities. The ecosystem and Arcadia Wash conservation diversion, this is the largest project and the most ambitious. It is located at Peck Park Lake. So we are currently putting applications for the Safe Clean Water program together for that. We have actually already started some of the planning and some of the feasibility studies for this area. And we're also working with the Army Corps of Engineers. In fact, we got an award for a new start on this project going forward. The price tag on this one at $80 million may come down significantly because that includes some land acquisition. And we are trying to redesign this without the use of land acquisition. These are the projects on the Rio Hondo side. Over on the San Gabriel side, the Basin 3E I mentioned quickly is a very nice, simple project. It's a big open pit just south of the 210 freeway, east of the 605. You're driving by before the, I guess, Old Miller Brewery, and you see the pit to your right on the south side. We are going to turn that into constructed wetlands and capture a lot of water there. And Encanto, as I mentioned, is way ahead of schedule. We got a little bit fortunate, and we have this entire project funded now with the Safe Clean Water funding. So what's next? Believe it or not, the 2021 permit is going to be released in draft form as early as May 1st, or the first week in May. So we're thinking that the new permit is actually going to be issued towards the end of this summer. Our preliminary looks at it, it doesn't look like it's very much different. Where it's going to do is it's going to pull in Ventura. It's actually going to pull in the city of Long Beach, and they are going to be introduced to the watershed management plan format, and they are also going to be immediately required to comply with TMDLs using the watershed management program. So that'll be something interesting to see. Those are the type of things that you might run into at League of Cities and Council of Government. I mentioned we are looking for a place for our Arboretum project. Of course, there could be more lawsuits. We could find exceedances. We very rarely get exceedances in our group, and they are predominantly bacteria and metals, specifically zinc, that are coming off our area. And as I think Alex touched real quick, who knows if the State Board and EPA are going to reorganize or come in the form of a new shape. For our goal going forward, of course, is cleaner watersheds and compliance with these mandates. And we want to do all the funding for these projects outside of the general fund, and that is our goal. And so with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions you might have.
Management Analyst Carlson and City Attorney Garagosian. Council members, do we have any questions on the presentation?
Quick comment, Madam Mayor.
Yeah, Mayor Pro Tem Goss.
Analyst Carlson, I'm very disappointed. In your entire presentation, you did not use the acronym EWIMP once. And so I was, hopefully in your next presentation, you can squeeze that in there somewhere.
Well, I'll tell you, Pro Tem Goss, EWIMPs are gone now. They stand for Enhanced Watershed Management Plans. And at the beginning of the launch, if you wanted to do an enhanced plan, you got 2 years instead of 1 year to come up with your plan.
Right.
So now that we're all got our plans, there are no more EWIMPs.
Fantastic report, James.
Thanks.
Any other questions or comments on the presentation?
Madam Mayor,
Councilmember Creeves.
question for City Attorney. When this process, the litigation process lasts, 20 years, like you were explaining for the 2001 permit, what happens during the pendency of the case with respect to enforcement under the permits? I mean, I noticed on one of the timelines that the agency has asserted default under the permits, but if the permits are still being challenged, and obviously if there's a 20-year challenge going on to that original permit, what's the effect of that in terms of compliance during the pendencies of those cases?
Right. So thank you for the question. The 20-year permit, that's the state mandate issue, and there's no enforcement under that. That involves the cities trying to seek reimbursement from the state. The 2012 permit, so that's 9 years now. That litigation involved the board issuing a notice of violation to the city, but since then they basically dropped it. They haven't pursued that notice of violation any further since we've been involved with our new WIMP, to use the acronym.
So we wouldn't expect there to be a revisiting of that based on the success that the board has had in that court process?
I don't think they will, because the circumstances have changed a lot since then. Perhaps Analyst Carlson has some other information on that.
Yeah, I can expand briefly on that. It was specifically for the trash, LA River trash TMDL. And so there's a lot of other TMDLs that are working through the watershed management plan that are going pretty well. And what the TMDL required was a level of zero. Zero trash was the requirement, or you could be cited. They gave you a option to put in catch basin inserts, full capture inserts in every catch basin in your city. We have about 165. Half of them are owned by the county, half of them are ours. It's been my recommendation that we hold off on doing that for one reason: the maintenance, the installation and maintenance of doing that would be outside of our budgetary constraints. Plus, there was also problems with flooding and liability. When those things aren't maintained, they get jammed up and you can have even more problems. So in response to the notice of violation, we sent a letter asking for an alternative form of compliance. In Sierra Madre, there are 3 main storm drains that leave the city. And we asked to be able to research using those 3 storm drains instead of 165 catch basins as a method to catch the trash material and clean it up. We just haven't heard back on that.
Thank you.
Madam Mayor,
Parkhurst.
Alice Carlson, so you said that the 2021 permit will be issued in May, kind of in the, and we'll see it in the summer time frame, and that it won't be much different than the 2012 one, I think was, if I'm tracking correctly. So what's the budgetary impact? I know we're off of the B's and into the M's, but meaning billions and millions. What is the impact to us to be able to meet our MS4?
Sure. What's expected for us, and we will be watching this development of the permit very closely, but we expect to be able to continue with our watershed management plan. We expect that we may have to do an additional reasonable assurance analysis that includes some new modeling and some new tracking. We are trying to get out of that by just pointing to our recent revision and eliminating that requirement. We haven't heard back on that yet. We're kind of crossing our fingers. That would save us a considerable amount of money. But the other cities are probably going to have to do that new analysis. And a lot of hydrologists and consultants are going to make some good money on that.
What are we looking at in a range of costs to the city?
To the city? Pretty much everything is intended to be covered by our local return. If we're looking at $150,000 a year, about $60,000 goes to monitoring. The rest of it goes to paying towards the studies that we're doing, the production of the applications that we're doing for the regional ones. If we have to do a regional assurance or reasonable assurance analysis, we'll have to get probably a new MOU or an expanded addendum to our current contract and do the cost share formula with our partners. Sierra Madre actually is in a pretty good shape with the cost share formula because of our small size.
And so most of the projects then are being funded by external sources. I mean, the money that we're paying is for consultants and plans and not actually action. And the action comes from things like the Measure W or whatever it's now called.
Yeah, we are required to do some of the beginning work, the feasibility studies, the planning, utility searches, things like that. We are required to do that. We're paying that with our money on our regional projects. We also know that it's a good bang for the buck to put some money into a quality application and go for the big regional funds. And we've been relatively successful doing that. So I expect that we would pretty much be doing this for the next year or two. And then we'll be really looking for construction money in the $5 to $10 million from the regional pot.
Okay.
Thank you, Analyst Carlson. That was an excellent summary and presentation. Appreciate it.
Okay, any other questions, comments? Okay, seeing none, thank you again, Management Analyst Carlson, City Attorney Gergosian for that update on MS4 permits. And we'll go on to the next item. Next, we have action items. We have our consent calendar, and I would like to ask Madam City Clerk Aguilar if she can present those items, please.
Yes. Before you tonight, we have several consent items, items A through H. Item A is consideration of resolution 2123 approving certain demands. And it is recommended that the city council approve resolution 2123 approving the payment of warrants in the aggregate amount of $247,129.59. Sierra Madre Library warrants in the amount of $2,365.44, and payroll transfer in the aggregate amount of $399,140.24. Item B is consideration of renewal of professional services agreement with Wildan Engineering for plan check and building inspection services. It is recommended that the city council authorize the city manager to execute the contract with Wildan Engineering. Item C is consideration of renewal of professional services agreement with Hong Tam for structural engineering residential plan check services. And it is recommended that the city council authorize the city manager to enter into a 3-year professional services agreement with Hong Tam Structural Engineering. Item D is consideration of amendment to the professional services agreement with Karen Warner Associates to include development of an affordable overlay zone as part of the housing element update for 2021 through 2029. And it is recommended that the city council authorize the city manager to amend the professional services agreement with Karen Warner to include $21,370 above the contract amount for the development of affordable housing overlay zone. Item E is the treasurer's report for the quarter ending December 31st, 2020. It is recommended that the city council receive and file this report. Item F is the consideration of award of construction contract to COPP Contracting for construction of the fiscal year 2020-2021 street improvement project in an amount not to exceed $895,000, and approve an amount also not to exceed $65,000 for the project management and daily inspection services for the fiscal year 2020-2021 street improvement project. And it is recommended that the city council award a construction contract to COPP Contracting. Item G is consideration of an increase to the facilities budget for the library improvements. It is recommended that the city council increase the facilities budget in fiscal year 2020 to 2021 by $25,000 to begin planning for improvements at the Sierra Madre Public Library. Item H is consideration of City Council Resolution 2122, authorizing an amendment to the classification plan and salary matrix and approval of the reorganization of various city departments. It is recommended that the City Council approve Resolution 21-22, adopting the reorganization of various city departments, city intern positions, hourly rate, and the amendment of the compensation fund and salary matrix. And that concludes the consent calendar reports, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Madam City Clerk. Before we entertain questions, I just wanted to invite Treasurer Mario to see if he had any comment on the treasurer's report for item E.
Thank you. Good evening, Mayor. So not a lot to say. You know, it's the standard treasurer's report, which lists our investments, our general account, our investments that we hold outside of our general account. And it also lists the cash balances by fund, which I think is always interesting to see where the cash is allocated and where it will be spent. There's another page in the report that we actually do it monthly, although we obviously only share it quarterly with the treasurer's report, and that's the bank reconciliation. And then finally, the last couple pages of the report lists the various investments, which includes LAIF, certificates of deposit, agency, bonds, as well as U.S. Treasury notes. And initially, just very quickly, when we started this 4 or 5 years ago, we started from really nothing. And our plan was to enter into a 4-year ladder with about 25% of the investments would mature annually. As times have changed over the last four or 5 years, as we know, with interest rates have declined substantially, we've shrunk the ladder down to 2.5 years just to keep more liquidity, and as the investment world changes over the next year or so, we'll probably be moving out more towards a 4-year ladder again. But we want to keep the liquidity available as the rates go up to be able to invest at that time. So I'd be happy to answer any questions if there are.
Thanks, Treasurer. And I'm actually going to ask you to hold on and see if we do have questions on that, but I'm going to start again at the beginning of the consent calendar to see if we have any questions from the council. And I do want to invite, if anyone does have any public comment, if you want to go ahead and call in now if you're calling in, and or raise your hand. So by the end of the question period, you'll have the opportunity to speak on public comment for the consent item calendars. So with that, I'll start with item A. Do we have any questions on item A? Seeing none. Item B, renewal professional.
Madam Mayor.
Councilmember Creeps.
I just wanted to ask, whether the staff had considered the cost of having these services performed in-house as opposed to the expected cost under the contract, and whether that was part of the consideration in deciding to contract these services out and the negotiation of this particular contract.
Okay, and I'll see if Mr. City Manager England, if that's something you'll answer, or if it would be Director Gonzalez.
I'll see if Director Gonzalez is on. If not, I can answer that.
I am on. Not sure if you can see me at this point. There you go. So we had looked at consulting or hiring full-time positions in-house, and what that really would entail. The way the contracts are structured, both for this one as well as the next one with our structural engineer, it's based on a cost fee basis, which basically means that the city retains 40% of the plan check fees that are generated, and the consultants will retain the remainder 60%. So in effect, it's really the city is still earning revenue on the building permits and other elements that we would charge plan check fees and so forth. Looking at hiring full-time staff, then we would have to look at fully burdened costs, and it would be at a much higher overall rate than consulting services at this point because it is on a fee basis.
Great, thank you.
Any other questions on item C?
Where am I?
Madam Mayor,
Councilmember Garcia.
just quickly, and it's kind of piggybacking on Councilmember Creeb's question. So I just want to have an understanding of how these fees are collected. We do see the rates of each individual within these plans. Is it billed at their each hourly rate and then we recover for most of the items 40%, or is it they bill that 60% that's grossed up to make the 40% for revenue for the city? Just wondering how the structure works, the 60-40 split, and one, I think one case 70-30 or 70-30 split, whatever the splits are.
It is all based on building permit valuation. So whatever a building permit will cost, maybe it's a new construction that involves a number of items, mechanical and electrical building permits, maybe it's $10,000. So we split that difference as 60-40.
So why are we seeing rates, hourly rates of individuals within the agenda report?
So the hourly rates are for extra duties. So for instance, we have a Kirsten Court Public Works project. So if we wanted to have plan check completed by Wildan Engineering in this instance, then they would conduct that at a hourly rate. So it's a reduced rate. And we're not splitting a permit fee.
And then finally, thank you so far. Finally, as far as staffing is concerned, and this again piggybacking on Councilmember Creep's question, I'm assuming that there's seasonality and peak loads regarding building, especially with lumber being so high right now. There's probably some people holding off on some of their home projects. I'm assuming with the staff, we would have issues, peak load issues, or issues when it's not busy and we're paying people for not doing work. But as far as the consultant's concerned, they can handle this, any type of peak load that we might have coming down the line.
Yes, and they do have the ability to bring in more people if we needed to maintain permit plan checks or issuing permits, doing building inspections and so forth. So we do have a building official and a full-time building inspector on staff, as well as part-time structural plan check.
Thank you, Director Gonzalez.
We have any other questions on I think that was item B still. Questions on item C? Questions on item D?
Madam Mayor,
Councilmember Parkhurst?
my understanding on this item, the additional fees is because we went back and made modifications to the housing element to include the consideration of institutional areas. Is that correct?
That's correct. So essentially, this was affordable housing on congregation lands, identification of specific sites and their parking lots within each of those sites. So this is in response to the council direction to include that as a component to meet our RENA.
Thank you.
Madam Mayor?
Creeps.
And of the cost that's listed in the consent calendar, the additional 21,370, only a portion of that, from what I understand, is actually going to be paid out of city funds, and the rest is covered by a grant that we got to pay for expenses related to the housing element. Is that correct?
That's correct. We do have funds that were set aside under our general plan and housing update fund. We do have, we had up to $99,000 available, and we've had to make a couple of, pay a few of our consulting fees through that. This would be one such fee. The additional $3,720 would be paid for out of that set aside fund to update the general plan.
Thank you.
Okay. Seeing no other questions for item D, item E, Treasurer's Report. I wasn't sure, Councilmember Creeps, you have a highlight on yours. I didn't know if you were going to ask a question. No?
Oh, no.
All right. Thank you again, Treasurer Amerio, for joining us for that item and for presenting. So questions on item F. Item G. And last item H.
I'm sorry, Madam Mayor, item G, a question on that. So the 25,000 is just for the planning, not for any of the actual improvements. Is that correct?
That's correct, Councilmember Parkhurst. 25,000 will be for site survey as well as to hire a landscape architect.
Thank you.
Any other questions on item G or item H?
Madam Mayor, I did have a quick question on item F. My phone was ringing. I didn't want to unmute at that time as we're all home, right? So I just wanted to have an understanding of the funding. I think it's pretty clear on page 3 regarding where the monies are coming from. It looks like 160,000 of the nearly $1 million is coming from the capital projects fund, I'm assuming through the capital improvement plan that we have. So I just want to confirm that most of the monies are coming from grants and or state measure money. I know it's all taxpayer money, but I'm looking at it just as out of our general fund and our funding. I just want to confirm where those funds are coming from, if somebody could help me there.
I think Director Semino is probably best to answer this one.
Yeah, thank you for that question. The Capital Improvement Fund is a matching fund for the RMRA funds that we received. That's the SB1 gas tax. There's an obligation that we have to meet, and 160,000 is the average amount. But the rest of them, Prop C, Measure M, Measure R, those are all funds that we've been receiving for quite some time now. They fluctuate in amounts, and it's really, that's how we get our street projects done, by these funding sources.
Thank you.
Madam Mayor, may I ask a follow-up question on that? Yeah, so Director Semino, so you said that this is gas tax funds. Have we seen a decrease in the gas tax funds, or has there been a decrease in gasoline purchases in the city, and therefore a decrease in gasoline tax that you've seen over the last couple of years?
I may not be the best one to answer that. Hillary might have that information, but we did get our estimate for next year for the RMRA funds, which you'll see in next council meeting. I have to do we'll have to approve a resolution for next year's projects. And it is slightly less, but I don't think we get reports as to, the exact amount in SB1 funds that are generated from the city of Sierra Madre. I think it's based more on population and percentages of the state.
It'd be good to get a little bit more information on that if we get a chance. And it can be, I don't know if it has to be in another meeting, but I'd be curious in kind of our forecast on gas tax funds.
Hillary,
yes, we can definitely provide a forecast for you. We'll work on that.
And the root of my question, so is that if we're looking at this from a gas tax perspective and gasoline, I'm curious to know when gasoline usage will drop with the introduction of electric vehicles. And so that'll have an impact on our street repair. And so I don't know what else is going on at the state level to counteract that. I've got to believe people are thinking about that. But I'm just trying to think ahead to make sure that we're planning for that. And we've spent so much time and energy trying to keep our streets nice. I want to make sure that we're planning for the future in that.
Councilmember Parker, so I'll see about in the next report when we report on the RMRA funds. Hillary and I will work together and try and get an answer to you about that.
Thank you, Director Semino.
Okay, just making sure we don't have any other questions for items F, G, and H. Okay, seeing none, I will open this up for public comment. Do we have anyone that would like to comment on the consent calendar items?
And just as a reminder for our callers dialed in, if you would like to make a comment, please dial *9, or if you're joined by your computer, just click the raise hand button on the screen, and that will put you in the public comment. And Madam Mayor, it does not appear that anyone would like to provide comment at this time.
Thank you, Mr. Delgado. So I'll bring it back to the council for discussion. Any other comments? If we have none.
Madam Mayor?
Councilmember Garcia?
Just quickly, I just do want to applaud City Treasurer Mario and the Finance Department for what they're doing with our cash, frankly, right? If you read through that agenda report, you could see that the LAIF doesn't pay much. So I'm grateful that we have a treasurer and staff that's paying attention to that. If we have cash sitting around, it should be earning money. And the ladder of the maturities was not lost on me either. Seeing that we have a bond ladder, so we are becoming liquid, and therefore we can enjoy the yield to maturity by these bonds maturing out and then getting the full return, the full expected return on these investment instruments, which are all very safe. I want to make sure that's clear too. So applauding Treasurer Mario from when, it's my understanding from when he stepped in, this plan was a lot of his brainchild, and also the finance staff for doing this, because we're making hundreds of thousands of dollars in interest, whereas we would not have been, even in low interest environment like we have right now. So our taxpayers' money is being used in a respectable and conservative manner. So I just wanted to make sure that comment was out there.
Thank you, Councilmember Garcia. And yes, I echoed those comments also. I think former Councilmember Harabedian, LAIF was one of his favorite topics. So I'm sure he'd be happy to see this today. Any other comments, further discussion? Seeing none, do I have a motion to approve the consent calendar as presented?
I move to approve the consent calendar.
Thank you, Councilmember Krebs. Do we have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem Goss. And before we do a roll call vote, do we have any further deliberation on this item? Okay, seeing none, Madam City Clerk, if we can do a roll call vote, please.
Yes. Okay. Motion to approve the consent calendar, Mayor Arizmendi.
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Goss.
Aye.
Councilmember Garcia.
Aye.
Councilmember Krebs.
Aye.
And Councilmember Parkhurst.
Aye.
The motion to approve the consent calendar items has been approved unanimously.
Moving on to the next item in the agenda is our public hearing, and I believe Director Gonzalez of Planning and Community Preservation will be presenting this item.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. This is Vincent Gonzalez. Actually, Joshua Wolf will be making the presentation. He does have a PowerPoint presentation that we're going to queue up now as well.
Thank you.
Good evening, Madam Mayor and members of the council. Today, the City Council will be considering an application for a conditional use permit for a proposed new wireless cell tower facility located on city property at 242 West Sierra Madre Boulevard. Next slide, please. So the current ordinance requires that the City Council review it and make a decision on a new wireless facility following approval of a land lease agreement, which occurred on January 12th this year, and a recommendation of the Planning Commission, which occurred on March 18th. And tonight we will be doing the last part in this process, the review and decision on this conditional use permit. Next slide. The conditional use permit requests the construction on 240 square feet of leased land, a wireless cell tower facility, inclusive of a 60-foot tower, also a wrought iron gate connecting the facility and the public safety building will also be constructed at the request of the fire department. There will also be necessary trenching southward of that land lease area to a utility pole. And finally, pursuant to our city ordinance, there's a height limitation on the cell tower of 60 feet for those that are located on city-owned property. Next slide. So at the March 18th Planning Commission meeting, the application as submitted was recommended for approval, subject to the additional condition that the 8-foot block wall enclosing the facility be built of a slumped stone brick to match the public safety building. As a separate item, the Planning Commission would like to revisit the current ordinance's limitations on height of towers and discuss increases to the height allowed. Next slide. So the project will be located on city-owned property. As you can see here, it's right next to our fire department, and it's located where there is an existing pine tree. That will be on 240 square feet of land leased area bounded by the west property line. It is currently zoned Civic and City Park. It is within the Measure D boundary. Land use designation is municipal, and it's surrounded by other Civic City Park, high density residential, and it is 105 feet from the nearest residential property line. Next slide. So the land leased area is located on the western edge of the property line and is approximately 36 feet south of the property line. The location is currently occupied by a 90-foot pine tree and a small patch of landscaping. From this overall site plan, you're able to see the path of trenching for underground utilities that will be connecting to an existing utility pole at the southern edge of the property. That trenching will be underground. It is only 18 inches wide. And next slide. A close-up of the floor plan for the facility reveals the equipment within the enclosure. In addition to typical equipment for wireless tower, a backup generator is included. All equipment, including the base of the tower, is located within the block wall enclosure. Next slide. On the left, a top-down section of the tower reveals equipment attached to the tower, including 2 microwave antennas pointed north and south, and 3 panel antenna arrays pointed north, southeast, and southwest. On the right is a diagrammatic elevation, which reveals the approximate proportions and dimensions of the panel antenna array. Next slide. Elevations of the facility demonstrate multiple height points of interest. From the ground and moving up, the wall will be at 8 feet. Next up is the first branch at 15 feet above ground. Near the top at the 60-foot point is the top of the tower pole. And finally at 65 feet is the top of the branch that is angled 90 degrees above horizontal in order to achieve that pine tree appearance. Next slide. So the facility is designed in a stealth design. It's achieved through applying synthetic bark material to the pole and a plating that is colored and textured accurately to represent a pine tree. Also by fitting socks directly onto the antennas that are weaved with colored and textured synthetic pine needles and attached with branch tips. Socks may also be fitted onto the microwave antenna in a similar fashion. Installing branches with colored and textured synthetic branch tips and pine needles. And finally, for stealth design, we're also including that the block wall enclosure be built of the slump stone that matches the public safety building nearby. Next slide. So these next 2 slides are going to be side-by-side elevations. I'm only going to give a couple seconds just to review this. I don't really have anything else to say other than on the left is what you see today, and on the right is what you would see in the future. And next slide. And next slide. So here we have our coverage map, and as you are probably well aware, there are existing gaps in LTE coverage in Sierra Madre. At the center of this coverage map, there's a clear demonstration of unreliable coverage that's represented by the purple. It spans east-west approximately between Lima and Mountain Trail Avenue, and north-south approximately between Carter and the South City border. Next slide. The proposed tower would significantly cover this existing gap and eliminate much of the city's areas of unreliable LTE coverage. Next slide. So in part of reviewing for a conditional use permit, staff would need to make the following findings: that there is adequate space on site, that the sited area is generally flat, and the facility is located further than 50 feet from the nearest residential property line, which it is at 105 feet. Second, that the site is sufficiently accessible from Sierra Madre Boulevard and is not anticipated to generate traffic, and that it will not be manned during normal operation. Third, there is no anticipated detriment to the public health, safety, or general welfare, and that the established FCC requirements have been met with a more conservative approach for safe radio frequency exposure for general populations. Interference with use, possession, and enjoyment of surrounding properties is mitigated through the self-design of the facility, mimicking the existing pine tree. Fourth, the need for facility has been demonstrated by the lack of LTE coverage in the immediate area and is and the proposed facility would cover that. Number 5, that the proposed project is consistent with the general plan, specifically objective C31 in providing telecommunication systems. And finally, the proposed use would benefit the public interest in providing cellular service coverage to areas that are well known to lack. The development may further be modified for additional carrier services. Next slide. Tonight, City Council can approve conditional use permit 2001 pursuant to resolution 2120, subject to those conditions of approval. They may approve the application with modifications. They may deny the application, citing reasons the City Council feels findings cannot be made. Or finally, they may continue the project and provide the applicant with direction. Next slide. It is recommended that the City Council take the following action. Staff recommends the approval of conditional use permit 2001 pursuant to City Council Resolution 21-20 and those conditions of approval. And last slide. That concludes my presentation. Thank you very much, and I will be happy to answer any questions.
And you have the applicant too.
And I also have the applicant here to answer any questions.
Thank you, Assistant Planner Wolf, for the presentation. I'd like to see if the council members have any questions on this before we open this up, this public hearing up to the public.
Madam Mayor?
Councilmember Garcia.
Yes, so within the slide and also within the agenda report, there's a mention that Commissioner Hutt contemplated the height of the proposed structure and whether or not it can be increased, because it's my understanding that the increase would then potentially expand coverage. And that's the reason, one of the main reasons, right, where we have this project in front of us to benefit the community and give better cell coverage. So I just want to ask, have an understanding of, I know 60 feet is the highest that we can go, but there's discussion from the Planning Commission wanting us to consider something higher. Is it too late to entertain this question, or what can we do at this point regarding a higher cell tower in order to increase coverage?
So I had brought this up with the applicant if they were interested in waiting on their application to see if we would consider an increase on that height, but they wanted to move forward with their application as submitted. We may, as a separate item, consider that increase in height, but the applicant would like to move forward with their application as submitted.
Thank you.
Any other questions on this item?
Madam Mayor.
Councilmember Creeps.
So I just wanted to highlight part of the staff report in case folks are concerned about, the removal of a, large, tree on the main boulevard in town. And I did note that part of the conditional use permit requires the applicant to replace on a 5-to-1 ratio. And I just wondered if staff wanted to speak to sort of the plan for that and where that will be and where that obligation will reside.
Director Gonzalez or Assistant Planner Wolf, is that something you can address?
It was one of the conditions of Public Works that the removal of the tree be mitigated through a replacement. And I would defer the question further to either Analyst Carlson or Director Semino.
Yeah, I can go ahead and take that. It's typical for the Public Works Department to include, upon conditions of approval, mitigation of protected trees. What's not as common are projects like this on public property. So it was determined by us that the pine, although not a protected species, being on public property, it does fall under the protected tree rule. So the 5-to-1 mitigation was something that we felt was appropriate. It was consistent with what we would have done in other circumstances. We can require planting on the same property, but that might not be feasible in this time. A lot of times we will allow applicant to provide the mitigation of 5 trees, in this case, to be planted in a parkway or a park. And we try to get it in the general area to keep our community forest canopy consistent.
Thank you.
Analyst Carlson, the pine tree that is, so I appreciate Councilmember Krebs' question there. That was one of the ones that our note there, that was one of the ones that I had. Can you tell me about the age of this pine tree and how its kind of life expectancy?
Councilman Parkhurst, I'm afraid it would be nothing more than an educated guess. I'm not an arborist. I pretend to be one on TV sometimes, but I think that this is at least 60 years old. The facility was built in 77. So I'm thinking it may have been a small tree that existed and they built around at that time. I do know that there are 2 species of pines in Sierra Madre that do cause some concerns. And Mayor Pro Tem Goss might have a recent memory of a Canary Island pine that failed spectacularly a couple weeks ago. I think this is an Italian stone, so I don't think they're quite as troublesome, but as an educated guess, it might have another 30 to 40 years.
Thank you, Analyst Carlson. That was a very educated guess, by the way.
Quite impressive. You sound like an arborist to me, man. Analyst Carlson.
Madam Mayor, I had 2 other questions, if I may.
Please.
The first is a clarification. I know that the tower is going to have 4G on it, and there's lots of talk about 5G out there. As I understand it, as very much an amateur telecommunications person, that the 5G is related to other boosters and it won't impact this project. So it's not like we're putting outdated technology on in the city. Can you confirm that? And then I'll follow up with a second question.
Is that something the applicant would like to address, and or if anyone else has the answer to that?
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
And I am the agent for AT&T. Oh God, I forgot your question.
Installing 4G, does it?
Oh, I'm sorry. Yes, my age is showing. Yeah, it's got the latest technology. We're not going to put up a new site with old technology. So this is the latest technology. It's not 5G. It will have FirstNet for your first responders communications. But the antennas, and associated equipment we're putting in is the absolute latest technology we're putting in sites that aren't 5G. Does that address your question?
Thank you. Yes, it does. And then a second question. So I noticed that associated with the project, there are 2 batteries and a diesel generator. Can you explain kind of what each of those are for? There's kind of 2 lines of thought in my mind. One is that when we have a power outage, my understanding or my experience has been that cell towers can get the power can get exhausted pretty quickly because everybody's on their phone trying to call their family, let them know they're okay. And then the second is that if there's alternatives to diesel generators, I'm always a proponent for those. So if you could explain kind of that there are 2 batteries and a diesel generator, what those are for from a use perspective.
The reason that we have batteries, those provide a shorter term backup power. So the batteries I'm not sure the exact number of hours that the batteries last. I suspect it's a function of demand, as you alluded to earlier. Then we have, in addition to that, a generator at our sites, and that is for the longer term outages.
And will that generator require routine testing and maintenance? And is that something that AT&T will manage, or will the city have to manage that?
AT&T does everything to manage the equipment at sites. The city is responsible for nothing regarding maintaining the system. What we typically do on our sites, we have a maintenance person visit sites every 1 to 3 months typically. During some of those visits, the generator would be turned on for probably 5 minutes or less just to test operation. We don't want an outage in our generator to fail. That fails the community. So we do periodic, just turn it on for 5 minutes or so, check it out, turn it off.
With the advent of backup batteries, particularly the solar storage type batteries, is there opportunity to replace diesel with battery technology as more of these cell towers go up?
Currently, no. Maybe in the future technology changes. As far as solar doesn't work for us because solar is not dependable enough to keep these cell sites operating the way we need them to operate. So currently the generator is the way we have to go.
Thank you. Madam Mayor, I have no further questions.
Any other questions from the council? And before someone asks a question, if you do have one, I want to invite the public to call in or to raise your hand. I know we had a person calling in earlier that wanted to comment on this item. So please go ahead and do so now as we determine if council members still have additional questions. Any of the questions?
I did have one.
Mayor Pro Tem Goss?
Mayor. Can someone go back and just refresh our memory? What is the actual notification protocol for all those private residences that are, they're not many, but those private residences that are actually close to this new project? When were they notified and what was sent to them? How are they contacted?
So there was 2 rounds of notification. The first was for the planning commission meeting of March 18th. They were notified 2 weeks prior to that meeting by postcard, and that was mailed to them. If I recall correctly, 2 weeks and 2 days prior to that meeting. And then we had another notice period. Oh, in addition to the postcard, there was also a sign posted in front of the land lease area, in front of the sidewalk. So we had a second round of notification that went similarly before for city council tonight, noticed 10 days ago. And that was also done by postcard and by an updated sign posted to the property. And that was to all property owners, not just residences, but all property owners within a 300-foot radius.
Right. Okay. Thank you.
Any other questions for either staff or the applicant? Okay, seeing none, I'd like to again open this up for public comment on this item, and hopefully we have the person that called in earlier. How are we looking?
Madam Mayor, you do have 3 people waiting to provide comment.
Great, if you can welcome them in, please.
Will do.
Hi.
Go ahead.
Question. I'm from the neighborhood, Kensington or Sierra Madre, across the street. How this construction can affect our property or our activities?
Okay, thank you for your question. If you can hold on, I'm gonna see if there are other comments and we'll see if we can answer any of the questions. Did you have any other comments about this item or just the question?
The questions.
Okay. Thank you. And we'll see if we can address your question at the end of the other comments.
Okay.
So Mr. Delgado, do we have any other, you said you have 2 more people. If you'd like to welcome on the next person to provide comment, please.
We do have 2 more and I'm patching them through now. Good evening, caller. If you are dialing in, you will have to follow the prompts on the audio to unmute yourself. I believe the prompt is *6, and that will allow you to speak.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Go ahead.
Oh, Good evening. My name is Hugh Davis. I was calling to find out what, if any, impact or changes there may be with regard to the seating area, which is immediately to the north of the pine tree that we're discussing. The seating area there was created through donation and contribution from my wife and I, in addition to friends and family members in 2017 in memorial of our son. And I'd like to know what, if any, changes to that area and the atmosphere for which it was intended might be anticipated.
Okay, thank you for your comment and thank you for your donation. I'm sure we can address that answer, the question also. I'm just going to open it up to the third person to comment, and we'll see again how we can answer the questions that were posed. Mr. Delgado, can you ask the next person to please comment?
Yes.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Hi there. My name is Sam Carmichael. I've lived in the community for about 2 years with my wife. We're small business owners. We have AT&T and have always been disappointed with the lack of service in the downtown area. It's made it very difficult to conduct any business down there. So I'm just here to lend my support that I do hope this gets passed, and with taking into account everybody's perspective on this, certainly. But thank you to those who brought this forward, and again, I hope this passes. When my question is, when will it be completed? And also, it sounded like new technology was being put in the tower, but it also won't be 5G or LTE. So just wanted to make sure that I have clarity on what that means exactly. Expecting there to be 5G or LTE for, the most high-speed internet situations from a mobile phone. And that's all I have to say.
Thank you, Mr. Carmichael. I'm sorry, I'm going to ask staff if we can address the question, especially with respect to the seating. I think we can make a general comment as to how it'll impact Kensington. And again, I think that's the way it impacts Kensington is the way it's going to impact the rest of the community. But who can address the seating question?
We'll start with Assistant Planner Wolf, and we can take it from there.
Great, thank you.
Okay. Mr. Davis, your comment is well heard. We had not considered where that would impact, but we would like to protect it. So if there's anyone else who can answer this question about how that area and the bench seating is being impacted, that knows more than I do, I would like to hear it.
Manager England, is this something that you can address?
So I don't believe it is intended to impact that area. The initial plans, it did not, but seeing that we're unclear in planning, I'll have to get back to you.
I would just wanted to make a quick comment that it's probably temporary construction impact. If there's any damage caused through installation of footings, that would be remedied and corrected. And there should be very little impact to that seating area.
Okay, and Mr. Davis, I'm not sure if you're still on, but if you'd like to email me, I want to make sure that we respond back to you. And again, I don't think the intent is to get rid of that. We want to recognize your donation and the memorial of your son. So if offline you want to email me directly, please do so, and we'll preserve as best as possible. And again, it may just be during the construction as a temporary move. And again, yes.
Just to reiterate it, the initial plans are not showing any impact to it. So I hadn't considered during construction, but we'll get a response out.
Great, thank you. And then just if anyone would like to respond to the general question about how it's going to impact Kensington, I can definitely take a stab at it. We are going to see that the pine tree replacement, if this is approved, and again, that's the same impact it has on the community, increased accessibility. And maybe there might be answer to the construction if that impacts the Sierra Madre Boulevard. So if someone would like to address that in generalities, that would be great.
Again, it would be temporary construction impacts, construction staging. We have to make that determination as to where that would occur on the boulevard and the driveway, I would imagine. It cannot impede the emergency vehicle access at that point. So again, it'll just be simply temporary construction activities.
Okay, thank you. And given that this is an unusual circumstance with Mr. Davis, I think he re-raised his hand. I just want to allow him to speak again if he would like to.
I will do, Madam Mayor. Mr. Davis, please follow the prompts to unmute your phone.
I would be happy to take the discussion offline if that's preferable.
Okay, Mr. Davis, again, feel free to reach out to me and or to the city manager, England, and we'll definitely address your questions and concerns.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Yeah. Okay, given it's that, I believe we don't have any more public comment, Mr. Delgado.
You do not have any more public comment.
Okay, thanks. And I think with Mr. Carmichael's, we're during the discussion earlier from the applicant, it would be the most recent technology, but again, not 5G. So hopefully that addresses your question. Okay, so to bring it back for discussion for the City Council.
Madam Mayor.
City Council Member Creeps.
I think another part of Mr. Carmichael's question was sort of the anticipated timeline in terms of when construction would start, and also probably more importantly when the tower would be online.
Thank you for that reminder. Director Gonzalez, is that something you have an answer to, or Assistant Planner Wolf?
I would defer the question to the applicant, Mr. Papas, regarding the timeline of construction and when it can go online as if it were approved today.
Thank you.
Yeah, this is John Pappas. We're obviously waiting for planning approval, final planning approval through this hearing. And our next step is obviously to submit for the building permit. That process for cell sites typically takes on the order of 2 to 3 months. So we go May, June, July. And then there's time to pick contractor, to order parts, all the stuff needed. So the bottom line is I would expect this thing to be on air functioning for the community by the end of the year.
Thank you, Mr. Papas. Okay. Thank you, Councilmember Creeps, too, for that reminder.
Mayor?
City Manager England?
Just one comment as council goes into discussion. If it is appropriate, if the council thinks to consider it, you could condition an approval of this based on no permanent impacts to the memorial area in front of the fire department.
Thank you for that. Okay. So for discussion, comments. So I'll just jump in here, and City Manager England, I appreciate you sharing that. I would like to, if this is approved, to have that as a condition where the memorial will be safeguarded. And but in general, yeah, if anything, the feedback I've received from residents throughout the last few years is our connectivity and the challenges we've had in some of these spots. I know this is when this first came up as discussion, this has been an item that people have commented it's something that is well needed. And given that the placement or the projected placement for this is a replacement of a tree that can at least visually look like it hasn't been moved too much, and if mitigation with other trees planted 5 to 1 would I think it would be beneficial for a community to be able to get a win-win in both the technology piece in this and ensuring that we are planting additional trees. So I'm definitely in support of approving this resolution. Any other comments?
Madam Mayor,
Member Parkhurst?
sorry for the dog in the background. Like you said, it was one of the biggest questions and complaints I get from people is the cell service, particularly in the downtown area. So I'm happy to see that. It is unfortunate that we're taking down a tree, but I do like that we do have a compensation measure of 5 to 1 on it. And despite my dislike for diesel generators, I'm actually glad there is one, so that we can have a self-service in the time of an emergency. As I said, I have personal experience with power going out and then self-service going out quickly thereafter. And then finally, I do appreciate the conditionality that you mentioned. It was going to be one of the things that I support as well, of making sure that memorial area remains. And so I am, like you, inclined to support this item.
Any other comments?
I just have a couple of remarks. I also support this. I agree with Councilmember Parkhurst. I'm sure Mayor probably had the same experience. We don't get a lot of complaints, but that's a pretty typical one, cell service. So yeah, I think we're checking a box there that needed to be checked a long time ago. I'm very, very pleased, somewhat surprised, very pleased that we haven't had any people in that neighborhood come to tell us they're concerned about the tower being there. Sometimes you get pushback from communities, but this has been properly noticed. The public's well aware of what we're doing, and I think evidently people see the benefits being greater than the costs. So I'm going to support this happily.
Okay. We have no other comments or further discussion, and be happy to entertain a motion.
I move to approve the conditional use permit 20-01 for the new AT&T wireless telecommunications facility at 242 West Sierra Madre Boulevard, with the condition that the Davis Family Memorial not be permanently impacted by this construction and the project.
Do you have a second?
I'll second.
Do we have any further deliberation on this? Okay, seeing none, I'll ask Madam City Clerk Aguilar if she can take a roll call vote, please.
I would just want to make sure the second on that was Councilmember Parkhurst.
I believe is Krebs.
Okay.
I
we'll
based
leave
it on
as-
the yellow rectangles that I see.
Okay. All right, the motion to approve with the condition that the Davis Family Memorial not be permanently impacted. Mayor Arizmendi.
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Goss.
Aye.
Councilmember Garcia.
Aye.
Councilmember Krebs.
Aye.
And Councilmember Parkhurst.
Aye.
The motion to approve has been unanimously approved.
Thank you. And again, Mr. Davis, if you're still online, please feel free to reach out. Okay, thank you on that. Our next item on the agenda is discussion. Item 1, approval of additional prepayment to CalPERS unfunded accrued liability of 1.5 million and authorization to join California Employers Pension Pre-Funding Trust, CEPT. And I believe Finance Director Guerrero Leon will be presenting on this item.
Yes, hi, good evening, Mayor and City Council members. I will be presenting today with Sophia. And city staff has researched options to stabilize pension costs, which are projected to increase over time. And as an effort to reduce the pension costs, staff recommends City Council to approve a 1.5 million additional prepayment to CalPERS for our unfunded accrued liability. In 2018, both pension plans were funded at around 71 to 72%. And the additional prepayment of 1.5 will be projected to have a total savings of 1.9 million, and both plans would be an estimated of 88% funded ratio. As of the latest valuation, the miscellaneous plan had a funded ratio of 79.6 and the safety plan at 83.4. So this prepayment will put us at around 88% for both plans. And now I will turn it around to Sophia to discuss our long-term strategy for funding.
All right, thank you, and good evening, Mayor and Council. So onto the trust portion of this discussion. A Section 115 trust allows cities to invest assets to pre-fund pension and OPEB obligations. And the City Council previously authorized the establishment of a 115 trust in 2018, but has not yet established a pension trust fund. Staff reviewed two primary administrators, that's CalPERS and PARS, Public Agency Retirement Services. And it's recommended that the City Council join SEPT, which is part of CalPERS, as it was deemed the most cost-effective option for best value. SEPT is self-funded, it's not-for-profit trust, and they offer two investment options. Participants would pay an participation fee, which is currently 25 basis points. That's equivalent to $2,500 for each 1 million managed in assets. On the other hand, PARS offers 5 investment options, but the ongoing fees are significantly higher, and they tend to offer higher risk options as well. SEPT also does not have a minimum initial contribution or required annual contribution amount. However, it is recommended that the City Council make an initial contribution of $500,000, and they also may consider annual ongoing funding of the trust. If approved, staff can bring the participation agreement and related documents to the next council meeting for the establishment of the fund. And we are happy to answer any questions if you have any.
Thank you for that presentation. I always think CalPERS presentations are very exciting. Do we have any questions on this agenda item?
Madam Mayor.
Yes, Councilmember Creeps.
I'm just wondering, in terms of the SEPT fund, is the intention there to use the earnings on the funds to fund future prepayments or other obligations in this realm, or does the corpus of the investment also, get used over time for those purposes? I'm just wondering for the strategy for funding the trust.
Sure, so funds can be dispersed at any time to cover any pension or OPEB obligations, but the City Council could put in funds at any time of their choosing. And if the City Council were, cash strapped in the general fund and needed to pay those obligations, they could disperse those funds from the trust to make those payments.
Thank you. Any other questions?
Madam Mayor?
Councilmember Garcia.
Yeah, so I think it's important to kind of have a little foundation here because we're talking about paying the unfunded liability, but that's all predicated on CalPERS returns. So I think within the report we talked about last year's return from PERS, and I think their projections were somewhere around 7%, and they fell short around 4%. So what does that create? That creates more unfunded liability for us generally, which is not a happy thought. But I'm not sure, but I know markets have been doing well. Can any of you speak to what the return year to date in the CalPERS fund for the underlying pension, not for the, obviously for the, not talking about the liability growth, but year to date, how CalPERS is doing?
So, Councilmember Garcia, year to date, I believe CalPERS is getting returns of just north of 12%, and they have a few more months that they would need to maintain that to have that applied to our unfunded status.
Thank you. And then also talking about PARs versus SEPT, the returns from PARs versus SEPT, and also I just want a little bit of dialogue or just some insight into the returns in those 5 funds relative to the 2 funds with SEPT, 5 funds being with PAR, and also maybe a little discussion about the variance or the volatility of those returns, because when you're in risky investments, volatility is important, because when you need to take your money out, if you're taking it out when it's in a downturn, that's obviously a bad thing. We are going to be open to some volatility. So I just want to have an understanding of volatility of SEP versus PAR, and then also returns.
So sorry, I had to pull these information up in front of me. Looking on the returns portion of it, SEPT is relatively new, so they only started in 2019, so they don't have long-term information, but it looks like their year-to-date returns for their strategies are, strategy 1 is about 12.37%, and strategy 2 is about 8.79%. And comparing that to PARs, it looks like on the lower end, on the conservative end, it's 6.57% for their 1 year, and on their riskier end, it's 8.11%.
That's surprising.
Yeah, it was surprising to me as well.
Thank you.
It wasn't their past year.
Yeah, and then also from what I heard from you, great presentation, by the way, to the point, SEPT has lower fees, so that's, and also less constraints on what our contributions are, so that is a good thing. And then finally, I know we are doing pretty well on our unfunded OPEBs, but as far as us setting this up, is it going to only be for the unfunded actuarial liability for the pension, or let's say we do get into some trouble with OPEB, which we are not in right now, thankfully. Can we take some of these funds and pay down some if we have unfunded OPEB as well?
So thank you for the question. For OPEB, we have CERP, which that's a trust with CalPERS, and it has its own trust fund. The SEPT would be only for pension, so only for the miscellaneous safety, the pension item.
Thank you. That clears up that question for me. And that, I think, is all the questions I have. I'm sure I have some comments, but those are the questions. Thank you.
Do we have any other questions from the council on this item? Okay, seeing none, I want to open this up for public comment. So if you have a comment on this item regarding CalPERS and prepayment, please call in now or raise your hand.
Madam Mayor, there are currently no callers, but I don't know if you want to provide them maybe 30 seconds to call in if they do want to call in.
Sure, I feel like they'd all be clamoring in to talk about CalPERS. Okay, I think that's good, Mr. Delgado. So I'll bring it back to council for comments, discussion.
Okay, Madam Mayor.
Please, Councilmember Garcia.
Thank you. So here's what I'd like to say about this. The stabilization of our city's finances is of obvious importance, right? Part of fiscal responsibility is taking care of our assets. Our physical assets, obviously, we don't have a great history of taking care of them, but we're doing that tonight. We talked about the library, and we talked about a well rehab. So we're taking care of our physical assets, but we also have to take care of our financial assets. And I think the plan that we have been doing has been great. We are in a position like no other municipality in our area. We were 71% funded. Now we're going to be closer to 90% funded. And that's not because CalPERS is doing a great job with their investments. So that is because of the staff and the foresight of our city management. And so I want to applaud that. Also, I think it's, this is the thing that a lot of people talk about, but we're not having any public comment on it, which is interesting because everybody's always shaking their fist about CalPERS and the pensions and all that. But I mean, I think it's important to understand how these things work and how they're funded, especially under PEPPER plans. We have the employer and the employee both contributing. That contribution goes into a fund, which is CalPERS, and it grows through time. Unfortunately, when CalPERS fund doesn't do as well as it's supposed to, we get stuck with the bill, right? As far as the unfunding of the pension liability. So it's not our fault as a city, but it does happen, and it's happened quite a bit. And as far as the expected returns has been going down, 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 and down, which means more unfunded liability from our taxpayers. But I just want our community to rest assured that this plan is a good plan. The way we've been paying this down, we are not asking for debt like some of our neighboring communities, asking for bonds, structuring the payment that way. We're doing it in a responsible manner, thanks to our city management. So I just want to make sure there's an understanding in the community of how these things work. So it's not that the city just gives money to these pensions and we just pay forever. There is a fund that's set up that's supposed to pay this, but sometimes it falls short, as we have seen in the last decade or so. But that's really my comment. I think this is a very, very good plan, especially funding it up front with a lump sum. As we know, as things compound, we have compounded interest, it grows, and then we're going to make contributions potentially, if this is approved, 100,000 a year, and that will continue to grow just like a retirement fund. So I think for us, right, as normal people, not that city employees aren't normal people, but I just want to make sure that it's articulated that this is a good thing, and it's a good way to go about paying down this burden that has bankrupted counties and cities. And we are not in that position because of the way our staff is handling this. But that's all I have to say. I just say kudos to staff on bringing this to our attention. This 115 plans are great, and hopefully they will continue to make money.
Councilmember Garcia said like a true economist and someone that's doing a deposition. So thank you for that. Do we have any other comments?
Madam Mayor.
Councilmember Creeds.
Well, I will let his comments stand, but I agree wholeheartedly with Councilmember Garcia's assessment. I just wanted to address one maybe less technical piece. I think for some folks, $1.5 million in prepayment sounds like a lot of money for a city of our size with our budget. But I wanted to make sure that the public understands that even with that payment, we will still in the year with a surplus, and that it's been a very carefully evaluated amount, and our finance team, is comfortable that even with that amount of prepayment into this, to the future liabilities, that we will still be, enjoying the fiscal health that we have, been able to achieve. And I really want to just again echo the kudos to the finance team for, maintaining that fiscal health, so we're able to make a sizable prepayment like this, because it really is, an investment into the future in years where we may not have the luxury of those kinds of surpluses. And I really think that we are being, conservative and responsible in terms of, using it to the best benefit when we have it, but still maintaining enough in the general fund for all of our rainy day funds, as well as being able to fund the needs of the city on an ongoing basis. So I'm definitely supportive of this plan, and I appreciate all of the work that has gone into it.
Thank you, Councilmember Krebs. Any other comments?
Madam Mayor. So I'll echo the other members of the council. I'm in support of this plan. both the 1.5 million funding of CalPERS and the setting up of the SEPT fund. And I appreciate the analysis that staff has gone into this to finding the right investment vehicles for us, and making sure that we make sure we meet our obligations. I know that the pension obligations in the CalPERS is one of Gabe's favorite subjects, and that he's extremely knowledgeable on. And I'm thankful for that. I'm also thankful for Councilmember Garcia and his knowledge of this area, making sure that what we're looking at makes sense for the city and for our budget. So I will be supporting this item, and I'm glad that we're going forward with it.
Great, thank you. Mayor Pro Tem Goss, do you have any other comments?
Not much to add. I agree with all comments I've heard. I just want to applaud our staff. This is this is not our first rodeo, Madam Mayor, and we've done this, and we've gotten this city is in such a ridiculously good financial condition, considering all the factors that look. We're at the end of a year of COVID, for crying out loud. I mean, here we are with a surplus, and we're able to make headway on this unfunded liability. That's not just good, as Councilmember Garcia said. That should be a model for government across this country. We really are doing it right. Our staff is amazing. Our finance staff, our management. This is truly a remarkable thing. So I again support it wholeheartedly.
Thank you. I obviously don't have too much to add to what's already been said, but just again to thank the staff for doing the work on this. I know the first time that a prepayment was brought to City Council was just so novel. It's such a new idea. And the fact that we can be at a point where at 91% potentially funded is really something to applaud. And so thank you to everyone. And with that, I would like to ask for a motion to approve this.
Madam Mayor, I would like to enthusiastically move to support this item.
Thank you, Councilmember Parkhurst. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Councilmember Krebs. And do we have any further deliberation on this item?
I just want to make sure the motion includes the prepayment as well as the authorization to pre-fund the 115 plan with the ongoing $100,000 potential fundings or contributions. Is that the understanding of the motion?
Councilmember Parkhurst, I believe that.
Thank you, Councilmember Garcia. Yes, it was the 4 items that are in the item there. The lump sum 1.5 million, the city joining the SEPT program, the funding of it for 500,000 this year, and up to $100,000 for the following 5 fiscal years as a part of the normal budget process. So it is the items as listed in the agenda. Thank you for the clarification.
Thank you, Councilmember Parkhurst.
Your second still stands?
Yes, I guess with one clarification, and maybe city manager can address in terms of what it means to consider the additional follow-on funding of the SEPT as part of the quote normal budget process. I understand that to mean that would be part of, each year we would consider the amount, if any, to fund into the trust, and that this motion would not require any particular level of funding in the future.
That's correct.
Then yes.
Okay, thank you. So we have a first and a second and no further deliberation now. So I'll ask Madam City Clerk if she can do a roll call vote, please.
Yes, the motion to approve. Mayor Arizmendi?
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Goss?
Aye.
Councilmember Garcia?
Aye.
Councilmember Krebs?
Aye.
And Councilmember Parkhurst.
Aye.
The motion to approve has been unanimously passed.
Great, thank you so much. Okay, last item on our agenda is the discussion item to consider approval of sole source contract to General Pump Company in the amount not to exceed $178,000 and $178,123 for the emergency rehabilitation of well 6 and to approve necessary budget adjustments. And I believe we have Utility Director Reynoso that will present on this item.
Good evening, Mayor and members of the council. The item that I bring before you today will require council action. Staff is recommending a sole source contract to General Pump in an amount not to exceed $178,123. That includes a 10% contingency for the emergency rehabilitation of well 6. Well 6 was drilled in 1964. We have 4 wells in our well field, and obviously they're among our most important assets. They produce all the water for the city. We analyze each of our wells on different performance indicators each year. We look at historical data, we look at energy efficiency, we look at production. Our operators do a site visit every day, and they do an eye test. They look for vibration, they look for production of excessive sand, and then we know that groundwater levels also impact how efficient, how well our wells operate. Historically, our wells get rehabilitated about every 10 years. We have had some catastrophic failures that interrupt that schedule. For example, well 6, I think in 2011, had a line shaft that snapped ahead of schedule. In 2013, well 3 had a partial collapse in the well, and that was ahead of its rehabilitation schedule. So there are certain things that can happen in that time frame that will accelerate a well rehabilitation. Well 6 was last rehabilitated in 2011. When we tested it in, I think it was October, it was still producing water at 1,000 gallons per minute, which is its design, but we did notice that it was starting to vibrate. When you have vibration, the well is drilled to about 650 feet below the ground, and the pump that lifts the water out is at about 430 feet. So and we're talking about a 20-inch pipe that goes down that far. We don't have X-ray vision, so we rely on all these performance indicators to see what's happening. We start to notice some vibration. When you get vibration on the surface, that means that a lot of things are happening down below, and those impellers are turning at 1,800 RPM. So they'll just start grinding themselves out to the point where the well will stop producing water. When we tested the well and we noticed the vibration, we put that well in the lag, which means that it became our last option. We wanted to preserve it as long as possible, and we were in the process of rehabilitating well 5, and we really couldn't move on rehabilitating well 6 until we completed well 5. Well 5 was completed about 2 weeks ago. It's back in operation. It's really important that we get well 6 rehabilitated before our peak season. There's about 8,600 hours in a year. Last year, from October to October, well 6 ran for almost 5,000 hours and produced about 280 million gallons of water. So it is a very important asset for us in terms of meeting our peak summer demand. One of the items that I listed in the staff report was the reason why we do the sole source and we use a water flush system. And in the past, prior to 2015, our groundwater levels were significantly lower, I think 60, 70 feet lower. And when we had our wells on drip oil, some of that oil or all that oil will accumulate on the top of the well. And when we turn a well on, we have what we call drawdown, where the water pools down towards the bowls, towards the pump, and some of that oil can get sucked up. It'll make itself into our granular activated carbon filters, and if it bypasses that, it makes it into our settling reservoir where we introduce the chlorine. So it just creates some problems. And so we moved to this water flush technology. We eliminated any problems with oil, any problems with oil bacteria. We didn't see any change in the longevity or the service intervals for our pumps. So they've been working really, really well. The health department also likes us to move away from oil drip, even though it's a food grade kosher oil. It's still a source of potential source for bacteria. And when you're using treated water, that goes away. So that's the reason why we do the sole source with General Pump, who is in San Dimas, California. They're local. They manufacture everything in-house, and any problems we have, they respond typically the same day. So the contractor is ready to start as soon as we get, if we get this approved tonight, they can start as soon as we get our contract signed, as early as Friday. and they have made a commitment to have the well done for us within 60 days. And that concludes my my presentation, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Director Reynoso. I did not know there was such thing as a food grade kosher oil for this type of work. And thank you for explaining the sole source. Do we have any questions for Director Reynoso?
Madam Mayor.
I knew it would be you, Councilmember Parker.
Director Reynoso, the pump that we have here, it is a proprietary pump. Is that correct? And can you tell me a little bit about why we have a proprietary pump and the advantages of that?
So again, the traditional way that wells are lubricated is with an oil drip. So up at the top where the motor sits, where there's a little storage reservoir, maybe 2 or 3 gallons, and we fill that up with that kosher food grade oil. And then as the well turns on, it'll drip oil, and it'll lubricate the line shaft all the way down to the pump. When we talked about the problems that created for our carbon in our main filter, we were looking for alternatives. One of the alternatives is a water lube or a water flush. So a water lube will turn on moments before the well kicks on, and will introduce water and lubricate everything. And then once the well starts pumping water, it will bring water up from underground and it will lubricate everything on its way out. That works fine unless you have conditions like we have here where we produce sand. So if you're producing sand and you're bringing sand up, and that can bind up your bearings on the way up, it could cause premature wear on your line shafts and bearings. So General Pump designed their proprietary system where we, instead of bringing water up from the bottom, we inject water from the top down, water that's already been treated and clean. We know the quality of the water, and there's not going to be any type of material that's going to bind up or cause premature failure of our line shaft and bearings. So that's the difference in the technologies: the oil drip, the water lube, and the water flush. And so the water flush is the technology that every time that we've rehabilitated a well, we've switched to this water flush technology. We've had a lot of success in reducing the amount of coliform bacteria that develops in the wells. Actually, since we've moved away from oil to water flush, I don't think we've had very many, if at all, any coliform bacteria problems with wells that are on water flush. So that's the proprietary system, is that it continuously feeds treated chlorinated water down the shaft to lubricate the shaft and eliminate the use of that oil.
Thank you, Director Reynoso.
Madam Mayor.
Yeah, hold on one second, Councilmember Creeves. I want to invite folks to call in if there is anyone that would like to comment on this item. Councilmember Creeves.
So I think I have one question for Director Reynoso, and then one question probably directed more appropriately to the city attorney. Director Reynoso, just you mentioned that the contractor had assured that the rehabilitation could occur in the next 60 days, and I'm inferring from your earlier comments about needing to get this done, while all of the other wells are online. I'm inferring from that the conclusion is that time frame will be sufficient to manage the water usage amounts in the next 60 days, such that there's no other workaround needed at this time.
That is correct. So typically, each one of our wells produces 1,000 gallons a minute, and especially in the early spring, late fall, typically we can meet demand with 2 wells. In the peak of summer, typically we'll run 3 wells, 18 to 20 hours a day. Sometimes we'll have to call on that 4th well. But that 4th well is really there as for redundancy in case we have an emergency or a problem with one of our wells. 3 wells can produce about 3.5 million gallons of water per day. That's pretty much would be one of our peak days. And so we're confident about getting this well done before July. And we have that commitment from the contractor that we'll be fine. Of course, we have partnerships and agreements that in the event that we needed additional water, that we can we can call on to bring in water. But for now, we anticipate that our demands will be met with our 3 wells that we have in operation, and we'll have this 4th well ready for that peak demand season.
Thank you. And then I just had very technical comments to the actual agreement, like I said, that I think are probably more appropriately directed at the city attorney. Should I just go ahead and offer those?
Let's see if there are any other questions, and then
Sure.
let's ask, then we can see if City Attorney Rogosian can address those while we're during the meeting. Are there any other questions? Okay, seeing none. Councilmember Creeves and oh, here we are. City Attorney Rogosian. So, City Councilmember Creeves.
Sure. So I think one just technical point is that there are a number of additional provisions in the agreement that probably should survive after termination. So I would suggest Section 15 itself, which is the survival section, as well as most of Section 18 would also survive termination, given sort of the procedural and other sort of technical provisions in Section 18. We'd probably want that to still be operative if there was any issue after termination. And then again, a more technical point in terms of the termination rights by the contractor in Section 16.2, it should just be clear that the contractor can terminate the agreement for material breach by the city, not just for material breach. I think that just leaves an ambiguity as to whether the contractor's material breach allows the contractor to terminate the agreement. I know that's sort of a silly result, but I suspect that just to be clear that the breach would need to be by the city to allow the contractor to terminate.
Yeah, thanks for those comments, Councilmember Creeves. So this is a form agreement. We have 3 such form agreements that we use throughout the city. What we can do is we can add those amendments to this agreement and approve it with those amendments if the council wishes. And I can make those changes to the other templates, to the other 3 templates we use. So going forward, this won't be a recurring issue otherwise.
Yeah, I appreciate that. That's a good forward-looking approach. Thank you.
Great expertise from the legal side. Thank you, Councilmember Creeves. So if there are no other questions, I'd like to open this up for public comment. If you have a public comment on this item regarding well 6 and a sole source contract, please feel free to call in now. And or raise your hand if you're joining us virtually. See, if you're in chambers, you could see who's running down the aisle to come to the podium. So now we have to sit and guess. Mr. Delgado, do we have anyone that seems to be calling in?
We do not have anyone currently raising their hand. Does not appear anyone wishes to speak.
Okay, I think and if anyone does call in while we're commenting or further discussing, we can bring them on. So with that, I'll bring it back to council to see if we have additional comments. Any other discussion? We like the well. We want the well to work. We like if there's kosher,
Madam Mayor.
food grade kosher oil. Councilmember Parkhurst.
So I noticed that we've had one well that we, as Director Reynoso said, we just replaced, just finished, I heard 2 weeks ago. We've got this next one, and we've got 2 more that are due in the next couple of years. And there's 2 concerns I have, and it's not meant to criticize the great work of staff, but we've got all of the maintenance on these wells in a relatively short period of time, or could have it in a short period of time, which poses two issues. One, from the standpoint of a budgeting perspective, and I think we've done a good job of budgeting, so we make sure we've got the money, so in case they all fail, there isn't a problem. But a larger potential concern is that a cascade fail, where we've got multiple pumps failing and we're not able to provide water to the city. I know we're doing a really good job of preventive maintenance and proactive maintenance, but I want to make sure to encourage staff to keep an eye on that so that we don't have a situation. And I think this is an example of us taking some of that proactive. We see that the well isn't producing the water that it should, and we're proactively replacing it. And I encourage us to continue to do that so we don't wait till everything fails and then we can't supply water to our residents, and then we've got a real big issue on our hands. So
no, that's a very good point, and we want to be proactive, not reactive. That's why we do all of our performance indicators. We look at all this data, and really we like to be able to with 4 wells, rehabilitating the well every other year or every second or third year. That puts us in that 8 to 12 year average. Again, we've had some catastrophic failures that kind of altered our rehabilitation schedule and kind of put us a little bit in the back-to-back mode. But we do, for example, wells 3, 5, and 6, they were all drilled like from 1944 to 1965, somewhere in that range. And so when we rehabilitate the wells and we camera them and we look at the original casing, those wells have all been relined to hopefully extend their lives for another 50 years. So there's a lot that goes into planning and scheduling these. Well 4 is, for example, well 3 is starting to show signs that it may need to be redeveloped. It's been, I think it was 2013. But that well was relined. Well 4, 2005, we don't run that well as much, doesn't see as many hours because of groundwater levels. It wasn't producing as much water as it was designed. But as groundwater levels came back up and it's now operating within its design curve, it's producing what it was intended to do. But that well now is coming on, or a little bit over 50 years old. So we will probably do some proactive maintenance on that, even though it looks like it's performing, in its design curve, to make sure that we don't have a catastrophic well failure or a collapse. Now the difference is that a well 3 rehabilitation next year would be under $200,000. A well 4 rehabilitation with the new liner would probably be closer to $300,000 to $400,000. So these are all things that we're going to be looking at in the next couple of months to determine which one of our wells is going to be the candidate for rehabilitation next year. We'll probably also test the wells again in the peak of summer in August to see how efficient they are when groundwater levels are at the lowest point of our operating season. Because that affects groundwater production and groundwater and well efficiency as well. So there's a lot of work that goes into this, and yes, our goal is to be very proactive and to stagger these out so they don't hit they don't hit the same budget year.
Any other comments, questions? If not, I would like to entertain a motion, but before we do that, it sounds like we did have someone that was trying to call in for public comment. So Mr. Delgado, if you would like to invite them in, please.
Yes, Madam Mayor.
Hello, my name is Elsa Saldana, and I wanted to know if these wells are also retrofitted and updated when you do the work that you discussed on the wells. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Saldana. Director Reynoso, is that a question you can answer?
Yes, thank you. That's actually a very good question, and that was actually one of the reasons why well 5 took a little bit longer. So anytime that we redevelop a well, I touched on it, like on well 4, we're planning to put a liner in, but well 5, we did bring it up to current health standards, and we did upgrade all the electrical to current electrical standards. So we see this as an opportunity to really make enhancements and improvements on the wells, and we do take the opportunity to bring them up to current standards. So, for example, at well 5, we raised the pedestal. The well was sitting just a few inches below the ground, just a few inches above the ground. Now it's sitting 18 inches above the ground. So the wellhead is more protected against any type of rain or any type of flooding that would occur in that area for whatever reason. And so discharge piping was altered. The pump head was raised, and we installed a brand new electrical panel to protect both our staff who's working on it and our contractors who come in to do our annual maintenance on the wells.
Great, thank you. Glad we had that public comment item. Okay, so now I'll entertain a motion for this item.
I move to approve the sole source contract to General Pump Company in an amount not to exceed $100,078, $123 for the rehab of well 6.
And Councilmember Krebs, were you gonna have a friendly amendment to make the changes that you had recommended in the agreement?
Yes, with the revisions to the agreement as discussed with the city attorney. Thank you.
Do we have a second on that?
Second.
Great. Any further deliberation?
I just want to ask Director Reynoso if he planted the caller because it gave him the opportunity to brag about how well they look ahead and plan for these rehabs. So kudos on both fronts.
Madam City Clerk, you want to take a roll call vote, please?
Yes, the motion to approve a sole source contract to General Pump Company with revisions to the agreement as directed to the city attorney. Mayor Arizmendi? Yes.
Oh, aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Goss?
Aye.
Councilmember Garcia?
Aye.
Councilmember Krebs?
Aye.
And Councilmember Parkhurst.
Aye.
The motion to approve with revisions to the agreement is passed.
That takes us to the end of our agenda. And I wanted to see if we have any other action items for future agendas. I did hear a few things during today's meeting, coming back with the estimates on gas tax and how that may impact our sidewalk projects. Possibly looking into reformatting our form contract or agreement as discussed in this last item. Also projecting some maintenance projects, anticipating costs, not necessarily action items. Maybe the first one was, but I just wanted to note that that's what I heard from the council today. But with that, do we have any other action items for future agendas?
Madam Mayor,
Councilmember Parkhurst.
at our next meeting, I have invited the Clean Power Alliance and their policy director to come talk to us about SB 612, as well as an upcoming rate increase. So the first part of that came from our last meeting, and so we'll have that information at our next meeting.
Great, thanks for the update. Any other action items or agenda items for future discussion?
Madam Mayor.
Councilmember Krebs.
So now that we have addressed the chronic cell phone shortages or outages in our town, most of the people that I talked to about that were happy and excited about that for about 30 seconds and then turned and said, what about broadband? So I would like to, not anything urgent or needed for action in the next, in the next foreseeable council schedule, but I would like staff to start thinking a little bit about maybe what the options are there. And I know it's often cost prohibitive, but I think it would be good to sort of know what that means and make sort of set expectations accordingly for the city and its residents.
I second that.
Given some of the work that's getting done at the federal level, we may be able to see some of
that
fruition.
Exactly right.
Any other items? Seeing none, we will adjourn this meeting. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, staff and council, for a great meeting. And thank you again for your flexibility and turning this to a virtual meeting from our in-person. Hopefully we'll be in person in 2 weeks. Hope to see you all then. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Good night.
Good night, everybody.
Thank you.